So now let's go back to this timeline thing. 2010. In 2010, there were two companies that would go out to multiple listing services, get the data, normalize the data, and make it available to portals. Those two companies were ListHub and Point2. ListHub was purchased by Move. That's Realtor.com. So now you look at the marketplace. Realtor.com for 11 years was number one. I'm going to go to the next slide. Realtor.com was number one. But in 2012, they were replaced by Zillow. And Realtor.com dropped down to number three. So Realtor.com was number one. And so they went out and they bought ListHub, which was the largest syndicator of MLS data. They did that in 2010. Why? Well, because if they did that, they could start to put rules on that data when they let Zillow have it. So now if Realtor.com, which was number one, now it went to number three, what is it going to do? Buy the source of the data. And now they can start placing restrictions on Zillow that they don't have on themselves. So it was a great move by Realtor.com for them to buy ListHub. But then 1 month later, Yardi purchased Point2, which was our company, and we were syndicating data. And we had no intention of cutting Zillow off. Why would we cut Zillow off? Because people wanted their data there, consumers wanted it there. So Point2 was purchased by Yardi, by Santa Barbara company. Now it's real interesting as we look at the syndication and the strategies behind it. Yardi decided it would continue to syndicate, and it's a real interesting story. Point2 sold to Yardi, but we couldn't tell anybody for 30 days. The reason we couldn't tell anybody that we had been sold, and we had the number 2 syndication engine in the country, the reason we couldn't tell anybody is we had shareholders who were employees, past employees. And before we could announce the sale, we had to get permission from all the past employees who owned stock. And so we got sold, we signed it, but we couldn't announce it. And we didn't know this, but ListHub had been purchased by Move about the same time. They didn't have the same restrictions we had. They announced it. We had been sold. I heard they had been sold. I knew we had been sold. The day that the announcement that ListHub had been purchased by Move, that morning, Spencer Rascoff called me. Spencer was the CEO of Zillow. And Spencer asked me if I would sell Point2 to Zillow. Now, I couldn't tell him we had already sold. Remember, we're in this quiet period. And so I said, that would be great, but I can't sell it to you. And I can tell you, in a couple of days, I'll be able to tell you why. And a couple of days later, we made the announcement that we had been sold to Yardi, and I talked to Spencer, and I let him know why. And Spencer said, well, you tell Mr. Yardi that I want to buy Point2. Now, Mr. Yardi had his own business. He wasn't interested in selling Point2. I had a special meeting with him, went up and had lunch with Mr. Yardi in Santa Barbara, and he asked me point blank, he said, Saul, aren't you having fun? And I said, I'm having fun. He said, well, then I'm not selling Point2. Not if you're having fun. And so he didn't sell Point2. But about 2 years later, he decided he really didn't want to keep Point2. And so he called up Move, and they bought it. And so Move then had purchased ListHub. They now owned Point2. They now had a potential chokehold on Zillow, because all of the syndicated data collected from the MLSs from the two biggest syndicators in the country were now owned by Realtor.com, which was number 3 and didn't want to be number 3. And so then we had a lot of turmoil in the industry, and Zillow figured out other ways to get the data. But right now, that if you want to get syndicated data for your website, you go to ListHub.